This is what the power law says. So we could multiply our holdings by 65 times. And if we wait 20 years, I think by 20 years, we will have hyper Bitcoinization. We are talking about a Bitcoin that is $5 million. So, we are not too late. And, so people should join because the diminishing returns are there. So don't wait to join now, be here. If you joined recently, don't, yes, it was different times and, we cannot go back in time, but we can look at the future and it's going to be a bright future, if you believe in, if you stay with Bitcoin.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Slatecast. I've got James with me again today, and we've got a special guest, which is Giovanni Santosini. Giovanni is known for his work in developing the Bitcoin power law model. He has a PhD in astrophysics, a diverse background in physics, neuroscience, and financial analysis. His interest in Bitcoin began over a decade ago, leading to the development of the power law theory of Bitcoin, and he's currently the CEO and director of research at Quantonomy. Giovanni, big fan of your models. So I think I first saw you on Andre Jick's podcast. I think you did really well explaining this concept. With him, it is a very crypto kind of curious audience. Obviously, with CryptoSlate and the Slatecast, our audience are a lot more familiar with the model now, definitely a lot more familiar with Bitcoin. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing okay. I have a little bit of COVID that I'm struggling with, but it's okay.
Okay.
So I say that because if I cough, that is the main reason, but it's getting better, much better.
Fantastic. Well, good to hear you're on the end. James, I know you've got a lot of thoughts and a lot of questions.
I'm happy for Giovanni just to just describe the power law, how he came across it, and then we can probably get into that just to give a definition.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, let's go.
I usually start with this slide because I want to emphasize that this is not just a model. It's actually much deeper than that. It's, first of all, I'm glad you called it a theory because it is a theory. And the reason why I call it a theory, because, we started with recognizing a pattern in Bitcoin behavior. And then, we wanted to understand why there is such a pattern. We went deeper and then we discovered that we're not dealing with one power law, we're dealing with 7 power laws. And in fact, there are power laws of power laws. So the entire Bitcoin behavior is full of these power laws that are all interconnected. And they're also causative. Like, for example, the one we see in time, we are able to explain now as the cause of adoption. We found this power law in the addresses. The addresses are linked to price. So we have a theory of how Bitcoin works, why the price is going up. But, I wrote an entire article that people can read. So we are going beyond, and we started to do also many different type of tests that it is not just a simple regression. I use, for example, a model that is based on network theory, where I use these equations that are meant to explain the growth of a network, and they show the addresses grow exactly like that, and then you can derive the price as if they were the links of this network. I did other work where I show, for example, that Bitcoin has these scaling variant properties that are very important to understand a power law, why power laws are so fundamental and why it's so interesting that Bitcoin is a power law. And they did it in different ways where there is not really a regression, is other methods. So eventually I made a post today that I want to create I have already a website, but in that website, I will have a place where people can go and maybe can have like little classes, breaking down on small modules so they can learn the main concept, because a lot of new people are coming in. Some people are exposed. Some people think that it's just a straight line, so I want to make sure that they understand it's much more than that. So this title is trying to explain that, once you understand all these connections, that the growth of Bitcoin kind of demonstrated has to do with people joining in and adoption. And people do that, I think, not from fear, but actually because they want to join the net. We want to participate to this human value growth, and then, the theory also show how the hash rate is part of this. So we're talking about energy. Energy is a very important component, like Saylor mentions all the time. That is what distinguishes Bitcoin from other systems. But energy is a core, the fact basically we are storing energy. Bitcoin is storing energy. And that is also power law. And the main power law that people discuss, it's a relationship between price and time, right? Price is a proxy for value. It's not the ultimate value, but it indicates some kind of value. And the fact that there is a very strong correlation between price and time, I think is very meaningful, because we say that often, right, about Bitcoin, but all what I'm doing is showing that a lot of intuition that people have about Bitcoin and the things that they claim are actually supported by the math and by the data.
Giovanni,
Yeah,
so quick question, just in terms
sure.
of the power law theory, is it only applicable to the dollar, the USD, or other currencies as well?
No, because, okay, so two things. First of all, it's important to realize that what we are doing, right? I don't know if it is clear, but it's the story of how we went from fiat to something else, right? That is this world, hopefully in the future, maybe 15, 20 years from now. I don't think it will take much more than that, 25, where Bitcoin will become the standard. So when people object that we're dealing with the dollar, they are missing the point. It's the story of how we went from dollar to hyper-Bitcoinization. So of course it's going to have the dollar as a point of reference, because it's describing how we went there, path to go there. So that is the first thing that I want to emphasize. The second is that you can do it with other stable currencies. You can do it. In fact, I have graphs I can show you. I did it with the yen. I did it with the Canadian dollar. I did it with the Australian dollars. I did it with all the major the euro. You can do it with gold. You can do oil. So anything that is really relatively stable, it will look basically like a flat line relatively to Bitcoin, because you have to understand Bitcoin has changed by a factor of 1,000,000. So if you have anything that is remotely stable and you compare it with something that changed 1,000,000, you can use it as a metric, for major change. So it's like a meter, So yeah, the meter is slightly moving away, right? It's slightly extended, but in comparison with 1,000,000, it's nothing. So it's okay. Yes, it works with almost anything.
But even like the Turkish lira, which is essentially a G20 country, or even the yen that we are, or if we think where fiat is eventually heading with this hyperinflation, the model won't be able to account for any of that kind of.
Correct. So when people raise this issue, right, to me, it looks almost like it's okay, because I know I'm glad you asked, because there are many people that it's almost like question that they often ask. It's really a misconception, because there are different ways of answering this question, right? Does it work with a super inflationary, hyperinflationary coins, or not coins, but currencies like the pesos, the Argentinian peso, etc. So the first question is this, right? I call it the flying cow fallacy, because imagine that I'm telling you, look, I discovered this very nice pattern, like Galileo, my and physics ancestor Galileo did. I found this very nice pattern about gravity. I drop a stone, and before Galileo, people were thinking that yeah, there was some kind of a pattern, but they didn't know what it was. And Galileo say, yeah, I thought it's actually a power law. It's another power law. The distance that the stone covers is a function of time. It's a square, so it's a power law, because power laws are powers of. It's when you have a relationship between two quantities, y equal an x to the power. In the case of a dropping object, is equal y equal some constant t squared. So it's a power law. And say, I found this beautiful power law. There is a very precise pattern on how an object falls on the ground. And I even give you a demonstration and show you the data. And then you say, wait a second, what about during a hurricane? And then you show me, some picture of a hurricane where a cow flying. And we do have such pictures where the wind was so powerful, the cow is flying. You say, what are you talking about? Look at this cow flying. The object is not falling down. It's not falling a power law. It's swirling around. It's doing some crazy stuff. You understand what I'm trying to say? You are in a situation, in a context where it doesn't work anymore. You are actually you can study such a situation because physics studies everything, even hurricane. But now, what is the signal? You have always to think about when you study these things. In fact, I am a teacher. That is part of why I'm doing this instead of dealing with a hedge fund and explaining all this stuff to a hedge fund and making a lot of money working with an hedge fund instead of being an educator on X on YouTube. I want people to learn about these things. So
Yeah.
when you think about this thing, think always about signal and noise. If the signal right now is a power law, but if I am in a situation where the noise is so huge that powers the signal, then you cannot, you are confused that you are focusing on the noise. So in that case, if you go and you are in a situation where you have a flying cow, you are going to study the flying cow. You're going to study the hurricane. And we cannot try to understand what is going on, but you're losing the signal in the noise. So that is the kind of situation, right? So you have to understand whenever you do a model, you have to understand the range of applicability, the things that can happen,
Yeah.
like, for example, adding a lot of noise and stuff like that.
It's based on the model, though. Like, I'm assuming you're familiar with the rainbow Bitcoin chart, which is the halving price regression. It's like non-linear regression that calculated on the Bitcoin halving. Yeah, and that's pretty much kept within the chart's lines or whatever color it was, and it's pretty much valid. Or you had the stock flow model that was valid for a period of time. It's like these charts or models are valid until they're not valid.
Yeah. So let me tell you something about all that. First of all, the rainbow chart. The rainbow chart was created based on what I call the grandfather of a power law. It's a model done by Law that he did on this Bitcoin talk. There was a forum where even Satoshi talked about. He was the first one to recognize that Bitcoin had a diminishing returns. And he didn't talk about power laws. He didn't have a log graph where are showing the straight line. He didn't talk about the scaling variance. But if you read the article or the post that he has all the right hints where he's saying that basically, because at that time I was there, I am pretty old Bitcoiner. I bought my first Bitcoin around 2000. So what he says, he even he has a nice diagram where he shows that as we go in time, we are losing returns. The returns are becoming smaller. And that is the core of the power law. And then he offers a model that is kind of a nonlinear regression. It's kind of, yeah.
So you're talking about diminishing returns theory, essentially diminishing. And would you then say with that diminishing, that the cycles are elongating?
No, I'm talking about the general direction. There are two types of diminishing return that often people confuse. Is the diminishing returns of the peak of the bubbles that actually are going down, and they are going down also in a very precise pattern that is an exponential. And then there is the general returns that are diminishing, and that is one-to-one with the power law, because I will explain you in a moment what is the difference between an exponential and power law. Power law is like an exponential, but with some kind of braking mechanism that creates this diminishing return. So over time, we are, you can even calculate. There is a very simple formula that you can use that is based on the power law. You can calculate what the returns are a particular day, and they are going down in time. That is the real core, and that is what the power law is about. So Law came very, very close to discover the power law. He didn't have the right tools, he didn't have the right language, but he had the right ideas. And then this other guy took Law and made the rainbow chart. So the rainbow chart is very strongly related with the power law. This is why it has been true for so long time. It's not the right way of looking at it, but it's basically related to the power law. Now, plan B is also related to the power law, because the story behind the S12 that he saw my post, the post where I discussed, this was in 2018, I discovered power laws all the way to 2013. I discovered power laws between price and addresses. I discovered it between transactions and price. Very early on, I found all these power laws. I didn't find power law between price and time until 2018. So Plan B found my post. He told me himself that is the case. And then he didn't like that I didn't have causation. He didn't, so okay, we see this power law, but what causes the power law? And now we know it's the growth of addresses, the price reacts to the addresses, and between the two, we can derive the power law in time.
When you say the growth, sorry, when you say the growth of addresses, which addresses do you take into account?
I can do it with different cuts, and I have a post where I show, okay, we can do one Bitcoin, 2 Bitcoin, 5 Bitcoin, and all of them are power laws. But the main one that I'm using is all the non-zero addresses. Zero addresses balance. And that one is a beautiful power law. And the power law grows with time too. And then the price reacts to the addresses square. And when you combine together, you get price equal time to the 6. That is the power law that we see in time. So they are all related to each other. This is why I call it a theory. You should read my main article where I explain all these things together. Now, to continue with Plan B. So what he did, he wanted to find a cause, and his idea, but it was a good idea initially, was that there is this quantity called S2F that has to do with issuance and supply. It's basically supply divided by issuance. And he claimed that there was a relationship. The only reason why he thinks there is a relationship is because if you look at what S2F is, it's a form of distorted time. It's time. It's the units of time. So it kind of works because basically he is describing again the power law. So it's kind of a distortion of the power law. This is why it kind of works. At the same time, it failed because he introduced this S2F. That is not the right way of looking at it. So look, it's a fact. It's a mathematical fact. I want to claim this. I'm glad that we have this discussion because we can make it different from the other presentation. People can look out other presentation where I go step by step. So probably this is a different way of discussing it with questions like this. So look, it's not just me. I'm writing right now a scientific paper that I will send to the scientific community. So, we will go through the peer review process. Right now,
wicked.
we have right now at least 7, 8 different professionals. And it's all, argument from authority. I'm just saying these are people like me that have played with data for 30 years. I look at data in astrophysics, in neuroscience. So to me, this is like second nature. Okay.
Yeah.
So all the tools, all the techniques, all the approaches. And these are people that we have Sina, that is a financial professor. He posts often on the power law. We have Fred, that is a mathematician. We have,
So when we spoke in Nashville, there were a couple of things that I had against. One was the coin Casper. That you said it was
let me finish my thought about it. So we have all these, and then let's take your next question, if you don't mind. So we have all these experts that have used many tests because believe me, as an expert, you are the first one that are questioning this thing. So there are times where I don't sleep at night thinking, I am right, I am wrong, do I did some mistake? So everybody is on a consensus because we did it not just in a way, we did it so many different ways where we are pretty convinced that Bitcoin is a power law. I had even people, I had this guy, just to give you a little story, contacted me. I saw this mail and he said, Giovanni, I was actually hungry with you. I am that person that work in applied field, in industry using, for quality control. So this guy, does this as a job every single day, looking at the statistics of different data, right? And he said, I was angry with you because I thought, this is so stupid that there is a simple equation that describes such a complicated phenomena. Then I wanted to show how wrong you were. I downloaded the data, I analyzed the data, and there is no doubt Bitcoin is a power law. Okay. So I I can tell you, it is a power law, has been a power law for 15 years. There is no doubt about it. We did it so many different ways. The only question is, will continue to be a power law? That is the only question.
Yeah, and power law is usually guided for like natural systems, and we're looking at a financial asset that's really determined by human behavior and sentiment, really. So yeah, my question was that we said that Casper was following this power law as well. So if we think Bitcoin is this great thing, why is there another coin essentially doing the same?
Right. Okay, it's a fair question. Now, first of all, we have to say about human things, right? I posted also this article. It's about in my Medium and also my X. I probably need a unified, and also in my, it's called bitposeidon.com, right? Maybe you can put it as a link if you like in the video, and people can go there. There is a newsletter, and you can see all the past issues. And there is an article where I use these equations, which are equations for networks. And there, I took this equation from this article where they look at social networks, and they show the social networks are power laws. And in fact, the entire article was about explaining, because many people assume that you see an S curve in social network, and there is no such S curve. They are power laws. And so I took the same equation, I took the same procedure. Is basically a simulation that you do, and you input all the data that you have. In this case, I put addresses, I put the price, and it spits out a solution. And the solution can be an exponential. It's very, agnostic in terms of what the solution is. And it came out that the solution is the power law for both the addresses and the price. Okay. So it's a completely different way of doing it. And remember, I took it from a paper that was analyzing a social phenomena, a human-made phenomena, like networks. They look at WeChat, this is a Chinese paper. They look at least 5 different networks that are, some of them are Chinese. They look at these Los Alamos preprints. So we look at real case of network that are made by humans, and they were power laws. Power laws in time, both for the nodes of a network and the links. And in our case, the nodes are the addresses, and the links is related to the price. So by the way, the new Bitcoin standard should be this book called Scale by Jeffrey West. Until maybe I write my book, and maybe it's going to be the new Bitcoin standard. We will see. But this book called Scale, and Scale because Scale is at the core. And we have a few minutes. I want to discuss Scale because it's really the core of the core of the core of the power law. Scale is all an entire book that describes power laws in nature, like physical phenomena, in biology. But then there is an entire big, huge section where the author describes how many social phenomena, in particular how city grow, are described by power laws. And you will agree that cities are human-made phenomena. So when people say, well, we cannot describe human-made phenomena with math, it's not true. We are not aware of this vast literature that describes human behavior. And there are a lot of human behavior that are described by power laws. In one day, somebody challenged me and say, well, history cannot be described by power law. It took me 5 minutes, literally, to go and find, for example, that the timing between wars, that is very much historical phenomena, right? It is described by power laws. The number of fatalities in a war are described by power laws.
So, sorry, Giovanni, I got lost. If you answered the reason why Casper is.
Oh, Casper. Thank you to remind me. So Casper, it's actually, I was talking with somebody the other day, and I usually don't, first of all, I was the guy discovering that it was a power law because somebody challenged me and they say, can you show that other coins? Because it's a fair question. It's something that I check, of course, myself. I check it ETH, I check the Litecoin, because historic is a old coin. The problem, you want to have a coin that has enough data because power laws are all about changes of many order of magnitude.
You could say 15 years of data isn't enough data.
So we don't have a lot of data for, we don't have coins that have lasted for a long time. So most of them, like 99%, in fact, all of them that I look at are not power laws. And then this guy wanted to know about Casper. I wanted to show, you see, your stupid coin It's not going to follow power law. And I discover a power law. Now, as a scientist, I will never cheat. I will never change the data. That is the most horrible crime a scientist can do, to modify the data, to lie. And so I report it because this is how a scientist needs to do it. That's okay. He looks at power law. I gave a guy, his name is Sam Kidd or something. He was the guy that commissioned me to do this research. I told the guy from the beginning and say, listen, we need to take this with a grain of salt, mostly because we don't have the 8 order of magnitude change in price like Bitcoin, and the time is also short. Now,
What's a sufficient amount of time to say, yes, that's an exact?
I would say I want to see a span at least of, 1 or 2 order of magnitude at least. That is actually the weakness, with the power law in general, that if you look in terms of magnitude, we don't have so many magnitude. But then you can look at, others. In this case, we do have many order of magnitude. Now, let me continue with Casper. Casper, and I know this makes Maxi angry, and this is why I almost never talk about Casper. I have this Discord group with you have 700 people. People can join, and we have a channel dedicated to altcoin. And it's kind of a ghetto. I say, if you want to talk about altcoin, you only do it there, guys, never nowhere else. Because we're trying to be respectful to the Maxi, and I am a semi Maxi because I think there is only Bitcoin. And once in a while, if you want to trade a little bit, of money for fun with an alt, I don't see what is the problem. It's that then you sell it and you make more Bitcoin. But to me, being religious on these kind of things is stupid. So if you look at it and you talk with the CAS fanatics that are almost as fanatic as Bitcoin Maxi, or maybe even more, they will tell you Bitcoin, Caspa, is like another Bitcoin. This is what they claim. I don't think so, but it has a lot of characteristics that are similar in terms of how, the hash rate works, how the difficulty adjustment, in fact, somebody showed me a graph. I didn't do the hash rate yet. And somebody did show me a graph of the hash rate, and the hash rate is also power law, like in Bitcoin. And the power of this hash rate is 2, like is hash rate equal price to the square, exactly like with Bitcoin. So I don't know, maybe it's even an evidence that if you behave like Bitcoin, then you get power laws, I don't know.
And then is there, I'm looking at the price model essentially, and the price, say Bitcoin 60,000 and you've got a support level of 30,000 and a resistance level of 180,000. So it's a 12x support resistance. It's a massive price differential. What would for you to be like, oh, hey, it's gone below, the model's outdated or it doesn't work? How long?
So so that is another criticism, right? People say, well, okay, there is a general trend, but then there are these huge variations. Well, that is not a model because, and in fact, this is where maybe I can show a graph to answer your question. So let me show this graph. I'm glad you're asking all these questions because probably this makes this interview different from others where I already explained the power law so many times, and it's good to go to these questions because I never have time to answer the question. So let's look at this graph. You see? So this is the first thing I want to say about people that claim, well, it's not useful because this is, I call it, I have actually, if you read my article on Medium, I have an entire article about misconception and fallacies. And then I call this the British old fallacy because he was the first one claiming these things. They, well, the range is so huge. Well, it's not my fault. Bitcoin has these huge big bubbles and the price sometimes goes crazy. But look at this graph. Look at what the bubbles do. They leave a support line that really, I think, even if historically we draw the line in between, that line came because, when you explore data in the first time, you try to do your best. Of course, you're going to draw a line through the middle, but it's probably the real power law is this support line. And then when you try to include all the data, you will get something in between because it's kind of a compromise. It's an average. But look at why the average is also power law, because when you leave, so basically this is how it works, right? So if you start from the bottom, we spend about 2 years on the support line. Then we leave a support line. The bull starts. It lasts usually 1 year. And then we go down 1 year. And recently, I was able even to show that even the bubbles are mathematical. When we go up as an exponential. And in fact, I made a complete model where I have both power laws and exponential to model the bubbles. And everything is mathematical. Even the decay of the tops is mathematical. Everything in Bitcoin. It's just crazy. Now,
is that more coincidence though than mathematical?
No, but let me finish this thing, right? So it goes up for 1 year, comes down. Look what happens. Tell me. So when anybody with DAO with power law looks at this graph, I want to, you have no heart and you have no brain. I'm sorry if I make this insult, but it's true because first of all, look at this. How the price knows that it needs to come back exactly to the power law after 2 years.
So
Notice what happened. So, and it will take one more minute. So the final result is that the bubble don't exist. It's almost like they cancel out. So when people say, well, is this huge variation? Not true. Because really, the red line is the power law and the red line is Bitcoin because these bubbles is almost like they cancel. It's almost like they don't exist. In fact, we can do another thing to show that because
even if, for example, Donald Trump gets it, the USA, for example, buy 1 million Bitcoin, I'm not saying that's happening or not, that would deviate power law. You're saying at some point we'll return back to it.
Right. So right now, like I told you, the only thing that we know that this is historical, right? So at the minimum, it should be acknowledged as an historical thing. That if we love Bitcoin and want to understand Bitcoin and studying, people at a certain point will study Bitcoin in schools. It will, a few years from now, when it's going to be the monetary system of the world, it will be a topic that is taught in school. And people will say at a certain point, they discovered it was a power law and it followed this very precise pattern and that, all these consequences. Now, the question is, will continue to be a power, right? So, and then you're mentioning events like this. Now, how these events are not like you thinking 15 years, we didn't have crazy events that could have changed the history of Bitcoin. Yes, we did. We have many of them. But what happened is that they can change locally the price. They can create a spike. They can create a deviation. But then the price goes back to the power. And the hypothesis, so take it as a scientific, a very valid, very strong scientific hypothesis that this pattern will continue. And it's all based on the idea of scaling variance. But if you give me 5 minutes, I can explain the idea of scaling variance. But before that, I wanted to show you this. I want to show you two things to elaborate a little bit more about these questions about.
First of all, if you've got, sorry, I'm just interested in your thoughts. You can quiet.
Yeah, I've got some questions, but the two of you jumping back and forwards. After generate price, I've got something I'll ask you.
So this graph is another way to show how the bubbles almost don't count at all. Because what I did here, so first of all, we are changing the way we are looking at Bitcoin, right? So until now, I show you what is called the log graph. So I take the log of the price, take the log of the time, and we get this beautiful straight line. Now, if you go in what is called the linear graph, so it's only price and it's only time, the usual type of graph that people are used to, then the power law looks like that red line. In fact, that red line is the support line. It looks like a hockey stick. So it's not really a straight line. It looks like a very fast moving up curve. In fact, it's the power of 6. When people say, oh, the price went parabolic. Parabolic is a square. This is 6, so it's going very fast. Now, what is the black line? The black line is the price average over 4 years. And notice how it comes very, very close to the support line. If I did 8 years, if I did 10 years, it will basically fall on top of that red line. You can see that as you average out the bubbles, the average behavior is the power law. So when people say there is this huge change in value, it's not true. They don't know. They are not familiar enough with the power law. Now, the other thing is about strange events, like huge, big, we call it black swans, right? We call black swans when there is something weird. So can you name, while I'm looking for the graph I want to show you, can you name an event that in the last few years was a very strong black swan, something that people
China mine,
tell me?
FTX, Luna,
FTX is
China
one.
mining.
What about another one? Something
COVID.
that affected all the economy, all the world economy.
COVID.
So look at this, what happened, this graph, right? So here is where COVID is. So what happened, right? At that time, we left. So this was another thing, right? Why did we leave a power law? Like here, we stay very close, almost like textbook, and even the previous cycles, almost textbook power law behavior. And then for some reason, right? Even here, we came back to power law. And here we left, right? Why we left? I don't know. Maybe there was some bullish news. It created like a mini bubble. At that time, we can go back and say,
it was the liquidity that came in from the central banks.
okay, whatever, right? So it created that distortion from the power law. Then what happened? We had COVID, and COVID reset everything. And we went back to the support line. In fact, it was only a week. It was like a one single.
Yeah, it was a V shape. It was
it's a V shape, but it was. It went through that red line just with a single week, right? The week, not the entire candle, and then it recovered very quickly, almost like if it was a barrier. It recovered. It bounced from that. So this is almost like a stress test of a theory. We had a very weird event. It was, impacted all the world economy, and the power law acted exactly like it should have acted. And so that is the idea right now at this particular point for the future. By the way, you have to understand, we discovered this in 2018. So we are already right for 5 years in terms of prediction. This is called out of sample. It's not that I came right now and say, oh, let's see how it works in the future. We already tested it for 5 years already, right? And we know that it worked. So the question is it going to work for the next 5 years? Is it going to work for the next 10 years? What the theory says, and Akiba, ask the question, and then I'm going to talk about scaling variance, because I think it's the core of a theory. But go ahead and ask your question first.
So I wanted to ask is, James mentioned around how power laws are often seen in nature. One of my other favorite physicists in Bitcoin is Margot Paez, who's a climate physicist. And she brought up a brilliant point when she came on the podcast a few months ago, which is that Bitcoin being tied directly to our natural resources on Earth is one of the things that fundamentally differentiates it from the traditional finance system, where you can create derivatives on top of derivatives on top of derivatives. Whereas on the Bitcoin blockchain, that's not possible. Do you think that Bitcoin, part of the reason why Bitcoin aligns with a power law similar to other things in nature is because although it's man-made, it is almost organic because it's tied to natural resources, to energy. Like it's ultimately.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because people forget it's not just a social network that it is, but it's also a network of machines. So there are all these machines integrated, right? All the mining machines. There is, like, if you look at my diagram that I have, so I can show you this diagram, because that actually is a good way of illustrating what you're saying. You see here this, and this is why I call it a theory, because it is a full theory of Bitcoin if you read my work. So I wanted to show you this diagram. Okay. So these are all the power laws that I discovered in Bitcoin. There are 6 of them. There is the one for addresses. There is one for the price and addresses. There is the one in time, hash rate, right? Hash rate is a power law. And it's a power law because the difficulty adjustment of how the difficulty adjustment works. So it's almost like a thermostat. So and so we're talking about energy. This is why even my title, and I say we are dealing with energy. It's a very physical system. And, there is other type of asset. Maybe you can say NVIDIA, because NVIDIA has to deal with the Morse law, for example, right? Of how much you can print on a chip in terms of, of the heat of it. So they have to deal with some physical issues there too, but usually it's so remote, the valuation of stock is so remote from these physical limitations of physical hard limits, that the different assets have, that it's not really related. With Bitcoin is strongly related because, in the end, for example, the fact that we are dealing with a physical system, we are bringing in energy. The relevance of that is improved security. So even if the average Bitcoiner doesn't buy Bitcoin because he says, "Oh, we have more hash rate right now," they don't think like that. But the big corporation, the institution, they do because they do a lot of research. They have quants, they have analysts, and they want their assets to be secure. So they are aware of the issues like the 51% attack, etc. So when miners come in and bring more energy, they bring more infrastructure, they bring more power, they bring more hash rate. That is something important in terms of the growth of a system.
Price can rate?
Price is influencing hash rate most of the time. The only time, because I also did this, I did a lot of things, a lot of study. I have this study where I use this method called Granger causality that shows what leads what. It's a known method to show when you have two quantities, if there is one quantity that leads the other, and which one is leading. And so I have a diagram that shows that most of the time price is influencing hash rate, but at the bottom of a support line is the other way around. It's the miners that are is the hash rate that is influencing the price. That kind of makes sense. But see, in this loop, in this very nice loop, if you go through the loop, probably you guys have seen this loop before, right? Basically, it's a continuous loop where there is demand that for a store of value, and that is expressed by the addresses, and then that demand. It's really demand is not the right word. I will have to use the word adoption, but okay, people adopt Bitcoin basically, and that is expressed by the addresses, and then that brings the price up. And you can show, in fact, there is a power law that shows the relationship between price and addresses. It's called the Metcalfe law. It's a known law that describes the value of a network being proportional to the square of the user, of the nodes in the network. And so it's crazy that Bitcoin behaves in this way. It's very different from any other asset. And in fact, actually, it's great because if we double the number of adopters, Bitcoiners, we get 4 times the price. If we triple it, we get 9 times the price. So it's amazing. And it's very different from the law of supply and demand, because the law of supply and demand doesn't work like that. And then, this shows that the price overall grows in time, because if you combine these two things, you get this. And then, that attracts more miners. This is what the loop says. When I found the loop, I thought, whoa, this is amazing. I think actually Breedlove made this graph, and miners are coming in, and they are attracted by the higher prices. They bring more energy in the system. They make the system more stable, more powerful. And then there is this difficulty adjustment that is very important. When one other thing that I want to explain, power laws are always created by iterative process, where basically you start with something like the state of a system, and then the next step, how the system changes, is proportional to the state of the system. And if you think about that, is exactly what hash rate does. The hash rate in the future, it depends on hash rate now. So the difficulty adjustment is very important. It's almost like you have a car, and now you have the car need brakes. Without brakes, it will not work. And Satoshi, in his genius, invented this incredible thing, very simple but very genius thing. And you can see then, if you close the loop, is that these are increase in security due to the increase in hash rate brings in more users. Like I say, even if the retailer maybe doesn't think, oh, there is more hash rate, let me buy the more Bitcoin, indirectly does, because the institution come in, because they feel more confident, because there is more infrastructure, etc. So the loop closes. So it's a very beautiful loop, and it shows why Bitcoin is so different. And it's almost like it would have been surprising if we didn't see power laws in Bitcoin. You expect power laws. Now, if you have a question, I can answer, and then give me 5 minutes, because I want to talk about scale and why scale is so
Yeah,
important.
let's go through that because we're close to the end of our time.
Okay.
So go ahead.
So this is why I suggest everybody to read this book called Scale by Jeff. It's actually your countryman is an Englishman, an English physicist called Jeffrey West, and he spent all his life studying all these power laws in physics, like a natural phenomena, but also biology. And then he went to study social phenomena like cities, corporations. By the way, corporations do not grow like power laws. They grow like exponential. And one of the things that Jeffrey West always say is corporations die because power laws are associated with stability. So power laws, in a sense, are the most magical of this relationship. They have so many properties, and that's amazing. This is why we should celebrate that Bitcoin is a power law. If you want it, if you say, ahead of time and say, hey, I would like some kind of very precise pattern for Bitcoin, and has to be something relevant. It's something that has a lot of interesting property and good properties. What should it be? A power law. And Bitcoin is a power law. Why? Because power law associated. Let me explain the concept of scale first. Okay, so scale, and again, I have a graph for that. Let me show you this graph, right? So this graph, first of all, it's something that H.C. Berger, he kind of popularized my model. I found my post on Reddit, and then he thought that I didn't have enough coverage. So he decided to write this medium, and the medium got a lot of attention. In his article, he asked, at that time, this was 19, he arrived to a blue line. And then we added, so this is until January, we will have to add the most recent data, but he added the new data. And you can see the new data goes through the power law. Exactly. Right? So a 5 years of prediction, basically. So it's not that we don't have predictions. We already made predictions. And the power law turned out.
What's the top? What's the top then in the next 5 years?
It's the top for the next. I will show you about that if you give me a second, okay? So forget about this top line. I don't agree on the top line. I don't think it's correct. But he has the support line. This was his idea. It's not mine. What I want to illustrate here is the principle of scaling value. So what is this principle? Principle is that if you look at this very particular property, that is the scale. What do we mean for scale? Scale are changes of 10. So instead of looking at the tree, I look at the forest. So if I look at the forest, I want to see like large changes in the pattern of the forest. So I'm going to look at changes of 10. You see how this scale emphasizes 10. So it has 10 to the 1, that is 10, 10 to the 2, that is 100, 10 to the 3, that is 1,000, 10 to the 4, and so on. And same thing with time, right? This is the famous log-log graph. This is how, if you see a straight line in such a graph, you have a power law. Now, remember this straight line, if it's a straight line, humans like straight line a lot because they are simple. We are monkeys, right? So including me, of course. We are all monkeys. We like simple things. Straight lines are simple. What do they mean? A straight line means the change, it's constant, right? It expresses the change between two quantities, in this case, price and time. And this change is regular and constant, right? You agree on that. But in this case, it's not price and time that are constant, related, the change between these two things is constant. It's the scale. So this means that, and this is exactly what Trollolo say, but here I'm saying it in a different way, in a more profound way, in a more mathematical way, using power laws. That as you change the scale, as you go up in price by 10, 100,000, you need equivalent times you need equivalent changing in the scale of time. So 10 in time. So this is why when in the beginning, it took very relatively small time for the price to go up a lot by a factor of 10. It took days, then it took weeks, then it took months, then it took year. Now we take a decade. So the next change in order of magnitude will go from 100,000 to 1,000,000, and it will take a decade, right? It will take 10 years to do that. This is the famous diminishing returns. Now, what is the good thing about this? There are a couple of things, a lot of things that are. The first one is predictability. Why? Because when a system is like this, it continues to be like this. This is why it's called scale invariant. There are very powerful processes behind scale invariant that make the system to continue to be scale invariant. And that is a very powerful principle that we'll use all the time in science. It's not me that invented that idea. It's one of the times when scientists think that we are confident in making prediction. So this is why Bitcoin is predictable, because of scale invariant. And you can see in this example, this is what I did. If you want to understand in a simple way scale invariance, think about triangles. You know how you make a triangle bigger? Everything is proportional, right? You have a bigger triangle, but the bigger triangle is proportional to the smaller one. You agree? So here I try to explain scale invariance in that way. I draw a smaller triangle up to the blue dots, that is the prediction up to 19. And then I say, imagine we go back to 19, and I want to use this principle of scale invariance, and they say, we can make a prediction because I can make a bigger triangle up to 24, and the triangle will tell me the general path, which is on a trajectory, because I'm doing something where I'm changing both the price and the time in a proportional fashion relatively to the scale. You understand how it works?
Yeah.
Then you can do that in the future. You can make this triangle even bigger and say everything will change proportionally. Now, people hate the diminishing returns because, of course, everybody would like to go back to that time where we could make a lot of money, right? 10 times, 100 times within few months or few years. That is gone. Now, I know individually, selfishly, it's not good, but it is good for Bitcoin. Why? Because if Bitcoin wants to be the monetary system of the world, it needs to do it in a sustainable fashion. So think about when you go from being an asset that is 1 trillion, and now we want to go to 1 million to dollar Bitcoin. We're talking about 10 trillion, so 12 trillions, right? So that means it needs to take its time. We need the infrastructure, we need the people joining in, we need the education. So we want to do it in a way that doesn't make Bitcoin crash. And remember, companies that are exponential crash. Cities that are power laws are eternal. There are cities like Rome that have lasted 5,000 years. There are cities like Nagasaki and Hiroshima. They were new, they come back to life. This is what Jeffrey West says all the time. Cities are eternals because they follow power law. And corporations, they don't last more than 100 years, 150 years because are exponential. So all the people that want Bitcoin to be exponential, they should think about that. They are selfish because you want Bitcoin being like a city, like Sailor says. Bitcoin is like a city, and cities follow power laws. And power laws will make Bitcoin eternal. It make Bitcoin robust, strong, resistant, anti-fragile. These are all properties of power laws. So power laws are beautiful. They are magical. They are special among all the other type of patterns. And this is why this is different from all the other models that you ever heard, because it's also a philosophy. It's a philosophy of Bitcoin that says Bitcoin is beautiful, Bitcoin is powerful, Bitcoin, another way of thinking that this is the path of least resistance, or even the optimal path. Bitcoin has found in its wisdom the optimal path to do what it needs to do, that is becoming the monetary system of the world. So it should be celebrated, it should be studied, it should be understood, and even cheered. I hope that we continue on this power law path because it's the best thing for Bitcoin.
Thanks, Giovanni. That honestly, you can take a breath. Thank you for all of that. That was incredible.
We all love Bitcoin, and I think we all share the same ideals and studying it. I think I'm looking forward to a time where there are kids in school studying Bitcoin, because I agree with you. I think it will be, but I think you're right. When you're going through history, you want to be selfish. You want to be a part of it. And the idea that some of the most interesting parts of history of Bitcoin are maybe going to be out of reach of a lot of people makes them skew their ideas around it. And I think you're right. It's going to take that bit longer, whether it stays to the power law or not.
So I want to conclude with, it's a very good thing that you say, it's a human psychology, but it's not late. It's not too late, because we are going to have probably other 2 order of magnitude. And we are talking about, if we wait, 15 years, we are talking about 65 pair. This is what the power law says. So we could multiply our holdings by 65 times. And if we wait 20 years, I think by 20 years, we will have hyper Bitcoinization. We are talking about a Bitcoin that is $5 million. So, we are not too late. And, so people should join because the diminishing returns are there. So don't wait, join now, be here. If you joined recently, don't, yes, it was different times and, we cannot go back in time, but we can look at the future and it's going to be a bright future, if you believe in, if you stay with Bitcoin.
I agree. I think the simple answer, I'm sure you'd probably adhere to this as well, is dollar cost average into Bitcoin. Like that's the way to get in, and following this model makes sense. You can also try and play it a bit like with the model. Every time it's well above the average.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, I know that we went so far, and we can come back, like you say, if you invite me another time, maybe we can do an entire episode on how to use the power law. But maybe we can look at this graph that I can show you very quickly. So, I know that many people don't like the idea of selling your Bitcoin. So I don't want to convince you to do that. But if you like DCA,
you can sell some. This is one thing. You can sell some to buy more Bitcoin. It's one of the things people people forget is it's okay to sell Bitcoin to buy more Bitcoin later as well.
Okay, yeah, that is one thing you can do. But also because you were mentioning DCA, if you look at the graph like this, these are from one of these people that I told you. He's a PhD in engineering and he knows about batteries, etc. And he created this very nice. I have similar things, but he improved it. And you can see how regular and precise, all these peaks corresponds to almost perfect peaks in the price of Bitcoin. So you could use actually the power law and oscillate, indicators like these based on the power law to tell where you are in the cycle, where the bottoms are, where the tops are, and then do whatever. Like you could, for example, decide to do DCA, and if you buy every single month, I do that myself, you buy a little bit less when you are here, because why will you want to buy when the price is so hot and it's going to crash? Put aside like what I'm doing when I'm coming close, and you see it's an index between 0 and 100. So you can say, well, when I'm coming close to 80, I start to buy a little bit less. I put money aside. I'm not going to use it. It's like if I was going to buy Bitcoin, but then when the price corrects itself, I'm going to use this money that I put aside to buy cheaper Bitcoin. And you can multiply your Bitcoin in this way. So you can use this knowledge actually, because science is one thing, technology is another. And science leads to technology. And this is a technology that you can use to actually look at the cycle, learn from the cycle, learn from Bitcoin, and then help you to get more Bitcoin. And it doesn't matter. You don't have to sell. You can do DCA. We call it weighted DCA. You can do clever DCA where, where you are on the cycle. It's not a virtue to buy the top, like what are you showing with? Doesn't matter what Bitcoin does. You always buy. I mean, do it in a clever way so you can get more Bitcoin.
I see these similar. I have an amount that goes into an exchange to buy every day. I actually do every day, and then I pull it out to cold wallet at a certain time. But because the amount that I put into the exchange is different to the amount that gets bought because of the conversion from pounds to dollars, there's always a slush fund in there. That's not the auto buy. So on days or periods where Bitcoin's down, I use that slush fund to buy more. When Bitcoin's strong, I don't touch the DCA.
Yeah.
So there's loads of ways you can do it.
Yes. So thank you so much. You were so patient, and thank you for the good questions and the opportunity to talk about this topic. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Definitely have you on again. Remember everyone to check out Giovanni's Medium. He posts loads of great content on there. Obviously, you can find you on Twitter, X. And for anyone who's listening on podcast services or on the website, the video version of this is posted in the highlights tab. of the CryptoSlate Twitter account, where you'll be able to see all of Giovanni's charts, and it might make a little bit more sense of some of the visual aspects. But yeah, until next time, everyone, thank you very much for joining us, and see you again. Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.